lovely to be with you here today. I'm excited to be in Poznan, first time at Impact. I'll give myself a bit of a promotion, so Senior Vice President of Innovation. But really what my role is to look into the future, and I spend a lot of time with my team trying to assess the trends, what are the signals we should be paying attention to, and what are the new solutions Mastercard should be building for this future. So we're going to share a bit of that today. Don't call me a futurist, though. The reason being is prediction is very difficult, especially when it's about the future. So we often look at a number of different factors that makes prediction even harder as we move into an accelerated pace. And the acceleration of tech adoption itself is quite interesting, and you may have seen this chart. A lot of people cover this. It's everything from computer to internet to mobile phone to smartphone. The rate at which we're adopting new technologies is really incredible. And now with ChatGPT and generative AI, we've seen an even faster acceleration, historically faster. But there's also a lot of opportunities to miss things when you look into the future. So revolutionary tech that had promise but still hasn't reached what we call 25% adoption or more, the kind of scale that we look for. Bitcoin has been around since 2010. And we still don't really have the adoption at that level. If you go back a few years, the team was hyper-focused on the metaverse. We thought we'd all be living in the metaverse, shopping in the metaverse, and yet that also seems to be now much further away. So kind of identifying the right signals, looking beyond the hype, and trying to assess what the future looks like is my primary role at Mastercard, and it's a perpetual challenge. Today I'm going to share with you 3 of the emerging signals and trends that I'm focused on. It's probably 3 out of a list of 10. First I'm going to talk about the rise of co-pilots, so how generative AI and these AI co-pilots are changing what we do at home and work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the currency of trust, which is really what we think of as the currency of innovation. And then finally, we're going to get into the world of retail and why retail itself is about to have a bit of a renaissance. So AI has been around for about 60 years. And for 60 years, it's always been in the backdrop. So every time you swipe your card, every single time, there's AI in the background trying to outsmart fraud, trying to assess the context of the transaction. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen the rise of transformer models, and that's shifted the interface. So with ChatGPT and all the other foundational models from Google and these kind of interesting startups, we can now have a conversation with the technology, which is very different. It used to be just engineers working in AI that could engage, and now we can see that anybody at home, at work, can actually leverage this technology in really interesting ways. Now, Copilot started off as really something for engineers. It was meant to help them with code generation, and that's typically how we've talked about it. But we've seen, and within Mastercard, we're testing a number of ways to actually leverage Copilots for all the employees at the company, to make them more efficient. The efficiency is a question of centimeters, not kilometers, but collectively, little gains in efficiency and productivity help us drive great revenue potential. And so we've even seen in Poland businesses that are adopting AI, and this, by the way, outpaces the rate of most of Europe, do see an increase in revenue. So what are we talking about when we mention co-pilots? The engineering co-pilots, of course, can write code, but it also enables analysts who are not engineers to code prototypes. So the idea of a no-code, low-code world is actually within reach. One of the superpowers of generative AI, though, is the synthesis of a great amount of information. So, it's been trained on the entirety of the internet, 30 billion sentences. These are large language models. Code is a language, but these models can understand language at a newer and deeper level. And so one of the ways we've been using it is for our attorneys and policy leads. Mastercard operates in 210 countries. We get so many regulatory bulletins, and we're able to now ingest that and just take out the pieces we need to be able to operate and move faster when it comes to complying with new regulations. The other superpower, of course, is content creation. We've all seen this, but now our marketing teams are able to use it to come up with brand strategy, to come up with new campaigns, to be less reliant on external agencies. So the Copilot platforms we're building cut across the entire company, from product developers to, of course, our lawyers, our marketers, and lastly, our engineers. And with that transition now, and what it does is it gives us the ability to think about new solutions for the consumer. How do we build a bot and a Copilot that consumers can use? And we're seeing quite a bit of that already. Of course, this is not Siri, this is not Alexa, this is a next generation. This is really, a Copilot that understands your needs at a much deeper level. I'll give you an example. I'm on a 3-week trip now in Europe, so I'm based in New York City. And planning my 3-week trip, it was like 50 different browser tabs. I had hotels, cars, restaurants, flights, and it's painful. But we're actually kind of testing a travel bot that can take all of that information. And so think of the impact on search. We're going to go from search results to consolidated insights, to answers you can actually act on. And so kind of the opportunity to bring voice assistance has major implications for shopping, travel, banking. Today in the US, if you ask any parent, all their children are already using these tools to do homework, to do the homework, maybe to do the homework for them. But it opens up the parameters of how you could use these at home as a tutor for your children, and eventually an assistant to your life, right? So we're quite excited on the implications and opportunities to bring Copilots from work to home, and of course, AI is the transformational technology of our generation. The challenge, of course, with AI is that there's a lot of implications for trust, and we need to really think about responsible development. How do we develop this in a way that we can still drive trust for our customers and for our customers' customers? And so the currency of trust is really kind of a story around the currency of innovation in this new future. And the challenge with AI is that it's actually a dual-use technology. So criminals can also use it quite effectively. And there's a number of kind of challenges. I don't think when people ask me generally, what do we think of AI replacing humans, I don't actually think that's the challenge. Generally speaking, humans using AI will be able to do more than humans not using AI. It's a tool, it's an enabler, it's a great productivity tool, as I mentioned, but deepfakes are probably the perennial challenge that we have to focus on. And the ability to replicate, not just humans, but products, data, that ability to create deepfakes is intense. I had created a deepfake for this event of Donald Trump speaking Polish. The compliance team said no, they made me take it down. We all know how litigious he can be. But it was perfect Polish in his voice, exactly lip synced to his mouth. And it took us just a few minutes to develop it. And so these tools are everywhere. They're in the dark web, they're on new platforms, and they're available to anyone. So you need a number of different strategies to kind of detect them. An interesting one is blood flow analysis. It can actually see the blood flow behind the video and determine if the mouth has been changed and if it's a deepfake. But I think as an industry, we're trying to come together to figure out how do we combat this. To give you some sense of the challenge, cybercrime last year was $8 trillion globally, before these deepfakes were in everybody's hands. And so if cybercrime were a country, it would be the third largest GDP on the planet. It would be the US, then China, then cybercrime, followed by Japan and Germany. It knocks India out of the top 5, it knocks Poland out of the top 20. So it's a major problem. Now there's a lot of tools that are developing, and a lot of kind of existing tools that we've been using that could potentially help us in this world. So not all is lost. But the rise of crime and the number of businesses being targeted is quite intense. Now we've been, for years, using tokenization as a mechanism of masking critical data. So we tokenize the card number so that we can use it more securely across a number of platforms. But increasingly, we're looking at tokenization as the killer app, even beyond security. And so it's led us to new thinking around how can we tokenize things like identity, like passports, civic identity, but also financial identity and financial documents, scholastic identity. How can we tokenize things like physical goods, personal data? Even as we kind of move forward a few years, we're increasingly going to see AI models engaging with other AI models. Because you may have a personal assistant that needs to do something with your bank bot. And so this idea of agentic AI, where you can give your AI bot permission to do things on your behalf, means that it's going to communicate with a lot of different AI bots. So tokenizing the data in between them is actually another effective way of protecting it. And of course, tokenization is really a story of digitization. And it's not necessarily a blockchain story. We were inspired by the rise and then, of course, the subsequent fall of NFTs. And the reason we found it inspiring is because it was a very elegant way of tokenizing data so that you can avoid double spend and you can show provenance, you can show ownership. So tokenization from the NFT space can be applied to a number of things that are not necessarily blockchain or Web3. And one of them is loyalty, and it's shifting a little bit the way we think of loyalty as a currency. A lot of big brands are looking at tokenizing loyalty, but I think the real benefit here is we can unleash interoperability, and we can let that spend cut across different platforms. So it's a new way of taking value and lifting it. And trap liquidity is typically how we refer to it. Of course, these technologies don't sit in isolation. They converge and they give us new opportunities to think about how can we reimagine retail. And retail is kind of at that, just the beginnings of what I think is going to be an amazing renaissance in retail. This video was meant to show how we're going to go from color to technicolor rather. And for years we've been hearing about this kind of merger of online and offline, this convergence. You often hear the silly word phygital, but I actually think of it as an enhancement of individual channels. So if you think, for example, what can we do in the store? How do we digitize the in-store experience? And there's a number of interesting things that play here. So first, the tokenization of goods carries with it the ability to add a lot of information to the product on the shelf. So now you can get product reviews, you can get product information, you can even see the sustainability score of a product while you're shopping in store. So it's kind of an interesting way of, I think I clicked forward too fast. It's an interesting way of thinking about bringing the digital experience to the store. The other kind of thing that I'm quite fascinated with is ultra-wideband. So ultra-wideband is an antenna we all have in our smartphones. And what that does is it opens up a communication channel. Instead of NFC, which is just a few centimeters, ultra-wideband gives you 200 meters of connectivity. So now merchants can open up a conversation with the consumer while they're shopping. What does that mean? Well, you can do things like digital issuance. You can essentially bring offers and loyalty. You can do wayfinders. You can have a generative AI shopping assistant. So there's a number of things that will change how we think about acceptance. For the acquirers and merchants in the room, acceptance doesn't need to be the end of the journey in a consumer shopping journey. It can actually be a communication channel. We can expand what that means. And then, of course, at home, there's some really interesting things around how we can bring immersion. We've seen with Vision OS and the Apple headset, great opportunities to actually bring some physicality to the home shopping experience. We've also been working on solutions where you can scan yourself and take your fit, tokenized of course, but share those biometrics with merchants. And what that does is it gives you an ability to see what clothes would look on, to do a virtual try-on. There's a lot of brands already exploring this, but I've always wanted to see what I look like from an outside perspective. Now I can do that with great clarity. So to wrap, Commerce 2030, we're very excited about it. There's three takeaways I'd like you to kind of think about. One is AI will be embedded everywhere. It is definitely coming. The technology is increasing at such a clip that between now and 2030, we'll forget what it was like not to have it. It'll be like your smartphone. It'll literally be everywhere. The other thing, of course, is tokens will be ubiquitous. And I recognize that sometimes it's hard with an audience that's not a native English-speaking audience to use big words like ubiquitous. So I'm going to ask Ava, do you mind just translating tokens are ubiquitous into Polish?
Sure, Nima. In Polish, tokens is tokeny and ubiquitous is wszechobecne.
Perfect. Thanks, Ava. Ava and I are into dialogue all day long. And lastly, I think the kind of real benefit of having these technologies and connectivity across retail, whether it's online or physical, is our understanding of the consumer is going to improve significantly. So we can go from segmentation, which is relatively generic still, a lot of talk about personalization moving into hyper-personalization, but we're actually have the ability to do a segment of one. We can say Bianca is not just a Brazilian spokesperson who lives in Europe, but we can actually identify her as a aficionado of identity solutions who's a big fan of all things Poland. And so that idea of personalization at a level where you feel like you're the only customer is also upon us. And on that note, I'll wrap for today. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.